All right, yo, what's up, what's up? Give up the rock. Hello, my fellow revolutionaries. Today, we're going to be taking like kind of we're going on a tangent from where we have been over the last number of streams, where we have been particularly kind of looking at, I guess, East Asian culture and like how the history of China, basically, in terms of modern history, it developed like kind of out of capitalism. Hello, Jag, and good evening to you. It is morning where I'm coming from, so I am in the future, but I can tell you the future is bright. So keep your hopes up, and I hope you enjoy the evening's festivities. So yeah, continuing in this vein, as you would know very well, Jag, because you've pretty much been here for the entire adventure. We're going to continue on our trajectory along kind of the East Asian history, and like I came across this by accident. So like I was like, oh my god, I have to do this. Good evening, good morning, Reality Pixel Media. Good to have you. Great to have you. I know how busy you are, so it's good to see you on a stream. Um, yeah, I came across this by accident, so I thought, why not do it? And like, just while I'm speaking and giving my general introductions, I might just put this music on in the background as I was requested to on Discord. This is some North Korean pop music, the true K-pop. How good is that? Just in case you're wondering. So yeah, don't take it on face value, anything that the South Koreans do, as the true K-pop. This is where it's at. So yeah, I will be looking today at a video, an interesting video that seems to document, I guess, life in North Korea, as done by a South Korean who's also of German extraction. So yeah, we'll have a look at, I guess, an inside look at North Korean life, which is really interesting. I'm very excited about that because you don't get from the West a lot of an insight into North Korean culture, apart from like the usual clips of, them doing military parades and firing missiles and testing nuclear weaponry out, and this guy over here, their supreme leader. So like outside of the Western propaganda, I would like to see what life is like, because like, the Western narrative is like, it's pretty dystopian, everyone's miserable, they all look the same, etc., etc. I'm interested to hear this today because I just read a book called Nothing to Envy. Okay, and what is Nothing to Envy? Maybe I'll Google it. Ordinary Lives in North Korea is a 2009 non-fiction by Los Angeles journalist Barbara Demick. Interesting. Everyone that isn't our allies, it's best to take with a grain of salt. Yes, yes. Takes an inside look into life in North Korea from a few different perspectives. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, cool. Quite the prolific reader you are, Jag. So yeah, anyway, let's do the video version of what Jag has been doing in book form, and have a look at this documentary. Now, I do apologize because it is in German, so like there are subtitles, but like I don't know if people just like to listen in the background and can't intently view. So unless you speak German, this might be a fucking problem. But like, yeah, hopefully you can actually see the screen, so you can actually see the subtitles as well. But like, if this is going to be a major difficulty for people and they're not feeling it, then like maybe after a bit we can reassess the situation and maybe look at something else. You know, but like I'm just interested to see kind of the visuals anyway and see what life is like in the Democratic Republic of Korea, the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. So yeah, let's do that. Because like I don't have a lot of preconceived notions about Korea. Like obviously everything that we get from the West in terms of propaganda. Like I'm obviously skeptical of the fact that they basically have a royal family. Let's be honest. I know there's a lot of hardcore Marxists and hardcore like tanky style communists out there that are just like no, no, like they're right, like it's not a problem, or like they'll defend the family and say that like like it's all Western propaganda, they're actually fine, nothing's going on there. I'm all for workers democracy, like in the fullest sense, the most developed sense of workers democracy, as in not having to be led by a one party system, or by like a supreme leader or a ruler of any sort, and actually having a dictatorship of the proletariat that is like democratic. And so like all of the workers get to decide what to do, with the value that is produced by society, as opposed to having to have exclusive membership in the party itself through political membership. And so like I am skeptical of any of these types of attempts at, anti-capitalism that take on this form of state authoritarian style, like ventures into communism or socialism or whatever the hell you want to call it. The US-backed decision to divide the country on the arbitrary 38th parallel had a major impact on how things unfolded. And you know what the interesting part about that is, and like because I've just spent a bit of time, speaking about like how I'm skeptical of anyone who's kind of like a supreme leader, and how like you can't like I would more support a fully developed like democratic system. Well, when you hear all the Western propaganda, it's always just like evil communist dictatorship versus like free market democracy in the South. And like the South was like literally under martial law, and like under like basically the same family was in control from like the point that they divided Korea until like almost the 90s or something like that. So like they didn't actually have democracy in like the Western sense anyway, like a liberal democracy. They had like a particular family that kept on basically taking power. So like, the North and the South were no different in the sense that they both had like ruling families, let's say, or a definite ruling class that took power and was legitimized by the state apparatus. It was just like these ones in the North call themselves communists, and the other ones call themselves, I guess, I don't know, capitalists, or like a free market society, and had the full backing of world capitalism, where like the people in the North were kind of just cut off, like completely ostracized from the world, and like had to kind of make it work. Let's just say make it work. So let's see what making it work looks like in the 20th and 21st century, under so-called socialism or communism. But like I am ready to have a lot of that kind of that Western style propaganda, that fantasy of the complete dystopia. I'm ready to have that kind of thrown away. Yeah, both sides can be considered as dystopian in two opposite senses. Yes, it is a very interesting way of looking at it. And welcome to the chat. I actually don't know how to say your name properly. Ollie Atlas. Ollie Atlas. I know you're a big supporter of the shorts, because I always see you commenting on short content, but I wasn't sure if you're into the long form either. So welcome to the stream. I've obviously tickled your fancy with the title about like dystopian North Korea. So like, yeah, let's have a look at it. But like I've said, it's German, so there are subtitles, but like you're not going to be able to just listen to this one. You're gonna have to watch along too. So let's give it a crack, shall we? We'll turn off the true K-pop and get into some hard hitting, I don't know, investigative journalism or documentary filmmaking. I don't know how to describe this properly, But like, it'll pull at the heartstrings. We'll laugh, we'll cry. It'll change our lives. That's the sort of sense that like I'm getting out of this one. So let's have a look, and I'll shut up. Let me just change the setting. It's the 21st century, Maoist reading group. Remember that. We're in here changing the game. Revolutionaries through and through. Don't know if I can change that. Adam, hello. That's twice in 2 streams. What's going on? Off the leash. If you're wondering what we're doing, we're going to be watching a documentary. You made it to another live, yeah. We're going to be watching a documentary on North Korea. It's German though, but so like unless you speak German, you're going to have to follow along with the subtitles. And we're trying to get an inside look into North Korean life, like well outside of the snippets that we get in the Western media, which are all like, military parades and letting off missiles and testing weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, join us on a German/Korean adventure. And like, anyone, please stop me if you can't see the subtitles or you need me to go back or something like that. Or there's a sound issue, just tell me. Me too. I'm keen. The German passport, that's interesting. I'll let the Germans in. Beautiful countryside, look at that. So green.
Meine Heimat ist seit mehr als 70 Jahren geteilt. Landschaften wurden zertrennt, unzählige Familien auseinandergerissen. Mehr als ein halbes Jahrhundert lang wusste man nicht einmal, ob die Familienangehörigen überhaupt noch am Leben waren.
Isn't that crazy?
Im Westen bekommen wir von Nordkorea immer die gleichen Bilder zu sehen. Militärparaden, Raketen, Soldaten, Hungersnöte, dressierte Kinder und einen Führer, der von den Massen frenetisch gefeiert wird. Aber was werde ich zu sehen bekommen? Schließlich werden die Orte und die Menschen nicht von mir allein ausgewählt, sondern sie werden mir von den Partnern vor Ort präsentiert. Werde ich überhaupt etwas mehr darüber erfahren, was für ein Leben die Menschen hier wirklich führen? Wie werde ich als gebürtige Südkoreanerin von den Nordkoreanern wahrgenommen? Werde ich willkommen geheißen oder werden sie Angst vor der Begegnung mit mir haben?
2016 this was, apparently.
Als erstes Reiseziel wurde uns der heilige Berg Baekdu vorgeschlagen, der laut der Mythologie die Geburtsstätte des koreanischen Volkes ist. Der Legende nach sandte der Herr des Himmels seinen Sohn an diesen Ort. Dieser zeugte hier dann Gun, den ersten koreanischen König.
That's interesting because like I know that they have a pretty hardcore, well, I guess the South Koreans anyway, I don't know much about the North Koreans, have a pretty hardcore relationship with Christianity, and they've taken it on, yeah, pretty well. So like there's easily translatable if you have a father figure in the heavens that sends down their son to earth. Very easy to see how they'd be able to convert a lot of Koreans to Christianity.
Hier am Berg soll auch General Kim Jong-il geboren worden sein, der in seinem Land als die Sonne des 21. Jahrhunderts bezeichnet wird.
I wonder what this music is that we're listening to. Like, is this like actual local music or something? Because it sounds rather like Middle Eastern almost. Not what I would expect. It's definitely not what we were listening to before with the true K-pop. It's definitely not K-poppy, that's for sure. I wonder if these are like indigenous instruments or something. Yeah, well, like it's not the usual Korean style music you hear, is it? Definitely not. That's why I'm really interested to know. I wonder what that instrument was. That flute sounding instrument, that woodwind instrument that was playing. It's beautiful. Look, they've got a camera. They're taking pictures, busting myths already. Hey? Well, well, well. Digital camera. No way.
제일 잘 됐다. 아, 제일 잘 됐다. 잘 됐습니다.
감사합니다. 감사합니다. 낚시 잘하고 가십시오. 네. 아, das ist schön.
사령님께서는 이렇게 백두산의 동서남북을 두루 잡으시며 우리의 주체적 경량으로 서구 개방의 역사적 기업을 이룩하셨습니다. 뒤로 돌아서시죠.
위대한 김종일 장군님께서 탄생하신 거양집입니다. 그래서 여기 거양집이 1941년 6월에 건설됐습니다. 우리 김종수 고모님께서 1943년 봄까지 이 집에 계시면서 국내와 장백 일대 혁명조직들의 사업을 지도하셨습니다. 바로 이러한 때인 1942년 2월 16일에 김종일 장군님께서 이렇게 소박한 깃털집에서 탄생하셨습니다. 우리 장군님께서 탄생하셨을 때 여기 밀용 생활이 너무나도 어렵다 보니 그때 장군님을 감싸안을 포단 하나 없었습니다. 그래서 유대원들이 자기들이 입고 있던 군복에서 한 줌 두 줌의 섬들을 뽑아내고 배낭 속에 건사했던 자투리 천들을 모아서 쪽무이 포단을 만들어 올렸습니다. 그 포단이 저기 갯장 맨 위에 그대로 전시되어 있습니다. 이렇게 밀용 생활이 어려웠기 때문에 김종숙 어머님께서는 말린 산나물에 통강냉이를 두셨고, 김종일 장군님께서도 탄생하신 지 몇 달 후부터는 군용식기에 담긴 붉은 밀가루 미용에 통강냉이 주물을 두셨습니다. 그나마 없을 때는 굶으시는 때가 더 많으셨습니다. 이렇게 밀용이 어려운 생활 속에서도 김종숙 어머님께서는 위대한 장군님을 백두산의 아들로 옥색에 키우시기 위해 자신의 모든 정성을 다 기울이셨습니다. 그때
I can't remember the name of the channel, but there is an Iranian musician on YouTube who does a really good job of describing how Eastern music is different from Western music and lots of good stuff. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's built on a completely different tonal system from my understanding. If you look at a piano or something like that and you have tones and semitones, so the space between white notes and then black, that's a semitone, and then a tone is between two white notes. Eastern music doesn't have the separation in just the tones and semitones. It's like microtonal almost, and so it sounds very exotic, and like they can jump and make all weird noises that you just don't get in Western music, which is interesting because like K-pop is definitely built on more of a Western structure, although it sounds like influenced by obviously Korean culture, but like the way that they structure the music is more of a Western style of doing it. And so to hear that instrument playing before and that music playing before it, if that is traditional like Korean music, very different from like their Western influence. Yeah, it is super cool. It's crazy. Yeah. Now, what she's talking about here, I don't know if you can follow that. Like, hopefully you guys can see the subtitles okay. But like, kind of building up this story of like the great leader and stuff like that, born in like, humble log or pine cottage, or what do they call log houses, long houses, like the Americans, like, same kind of thing. Lincoln was born in one of these types of houses. So like there's this kind of mythology built up around the leader, and like times were tough. Cindy the Skull. My Brothers and Sisters in the North was a good doco. I liked it. Well, if you're familiar with it, good. Because we're going to be going over it today, so you can maybe connect some dots for us, and help us put things together. But there is an element. It's interesting that she's going on about like, people living on grass and stuff like that. So his mother lived on grass, and like they barely had food for him. They barely had like material like to make a blanket for a baby and stuff like that. And like, while this is, paints a nice mythology about like someone coming from very humble beginnings, like you have to understand under Japanese occupation, like life was definitely like that for the subjugated. I was speaking to some people that lived through the Japanese occupation of Singapore in the Second World War, and this woman was describing to me that one of the reasons that she had survived under the Japanese occupation, because food was so scarce and stuff like that, was because her mother knew in Singapore, like when it was all still like marshland and stuff like that, and jungle, like not the Singapore we know today with fancy skyscrapers and all that sort of stuff, like very jungle-esque island. She said she survived, or the family survived, because the mother knew which types of grasses, not just to eat, but which ones had medicinal purposes as well. And so they were able to kind of semi-survive off the land, and do whatever they needed, basically to survive, including, eating all sorts of like rats. And like she said, her father knew how to eat bats, and like the only way to eat bats, you have to take this specific gland out of it, because if you cook it with this gland, it spoils all of the meat. So like people have to basically know how to survive, really, especially like I said under Japanese occupation, because the Japanese were pretty strict and ruthless when it came to the people they were subjugating. So I could only imagine what was going on here in Korea under Japanese subjugation and rule. And like, what Korea was really going through, because, once the time by the time World War II ends, kind of thing, and like, you know, Korea's liberated, and then the Americans come in to kind of liberate them, and the Soviets too, really, let's be honest, and they've just make an agreement over these people and decide to split the country in half. Like, times would have been pretty fucking tough, I would say. I think the Japanese story is wild too. A country who alternated throughout history, going through periods of rabid imperialism and periods of intense separationism. Yeah, yeah. And periods where they got dominated by China too. So like they've been, you know, they've always had imperial ambitions to be the big dog in that area, especially imagine being next to like Manchuria and China and stuff like that. It'd be hard to compete with them. So they would have always had big ambitions. Anyway, let's get back to it.
그때 어머님께서 쓰시던 사정물들이 거양집 방 안에 그대로 전시되어 있습니다. 네, 여기 장군님 거양집에는 답사가 끊기는 일이 없습니다. 휴식이 없고 1년 12달 계속 답사가 진행됩니다. 여기. 지금 떠 단체가
근데 하루에 12번씩 하시면은 피곤하시겠다.
솔직히 육체적으로 힘든데 장군님 거양집 지키는 그런 금지감으로 해서 힘이 막 섰습니다. 더 왔으면 합니다. 더 했으면 하고. 싸우십시오 이제.
먹도 없습니다.
빨리 아이랑 먹고 후대를
지금 많이
하루의 길고 나의 젊으면 단순한 불빛이 우리 영혼에 서글의 운명과 윤리를 위해 이 밤도 지새우지 김정은 공지 세월이 끝까지 안녕히 마시리 한마음 따르며 이편 다시 모시리
So like, I can't remember. Did she say that she had her venture curated for her? I think she said something like that in the plane, that she was supposedly being taken around from place to place, kind of thing. And she was hoping to get a glimpse of inner life and like outside of what you would see in the mainstream. So like, you know, not a bad stop on the way. Again, like, you know, an aquatic center, and pretty fancy looking one as well. Really goes against that dystopian feel that we're supposed to have, where everyone's in absolute poverty. Because that's the general vibe. I'm just saying the general vibe that you get from the media. I know that's not the case on the ground, but like, you know, not a bad little aquatic center. Made me feel like going for a swim just looking at it. Just say. Another good documentary around North Korea is Loyal Citizens of Pyongyang in Seoul. Okay. Thank you. I'm not sure if we've seen you in the stream before. Cindy the Skull. If this is your first time here, let us know. But thanks for the suggestion.
위대한 현재 김정일께서 나같이 적었습니다. 총인들은 사회주의 건설의 어느 부분, 어느 처소에서 일하든지 자기에게 맡겨진 가업을 언제나 책임적으로 모범적으로 수행하여야 하며 당의 혁명적 경제 전략을 관철하기 위한 투쟁에서 돌격대의 용의를 높이 떨쳐야 합니다. 지난해 6월 더 총인군수 돌격대는 장자강 기술계 체육공원 건설 공사를 통째로 맡아놨다. 총인 학생들과 인민들이 즐겨 찾는 체육공원 건설해야 한다고 하셨다. 윤유가 부족하여 린전 기자가 멈췄으면 돌격대원들은 마트리아 등짐으로 덜과 흙을 나르며 수렁탕을 메워 나갔다. 그들이 하루에 눈을 붙이는 시간은 겨우 3시간 되나마나 하였다. 병실로 오가는 시간마저 아까워 돌격대원들은 아예 공사장에臨時 숙소를 꾸렸다. 이런 의지, 이런 정신력으로 청인 돌격대원들은 1년 10개월이나 걸려야 한다는 체육공원 건설 공사를 6개월 동안에 끝내는 놀라운 기적을 창조했다. 얼마나 믿었고 훌륭한 청인 돌격대원들인가. 흥미하는 본스님께서는 체육공원 건설 완성공의 보고를 받으시고 먼데 기뻐하시며 장자강 인민유원지로 명명해 주셨다는 소식을 들었을 때 너무 기뻐 서로 부둥켜안고 울고 웃던 청년돌격대원들 말하겠습니다.
그리고 촬영 있지 않습니까? 그 봉사과에서 임무정보, 그 우리 지금 무슨 광고 편집물 같은 거 짜는 거 사진 화상들 그거 좀 마좀 해주십시오. 그거 며칠 동안 보내주실 거나 그거 좀 해주십시오. 일요일날이라든가 목요일날이라든가 이런 날 쭉 오게 되면 사람 많겠습니다. 굉장히 이게 좀 움직이기도 힘들겠습니다. 오늘 토요일날이니까 토요일날은 우리가 정치일이란 말입니다. 그래서 우린 봉사단이니까 그런데 봉사단이 아닌 데는 다 정치일이기 때문에 오는 사람이 좀 적단 말입니다.
그러니까 정치일이 뭡니까?
그러니까 학습하는 날.
학습하는
네, 정치 학습하는 날.
주로 어떤 내용?
그러니까 그날 강의도 하고, 그러니까 강연회도 하고, 그다음에 우리 무슨 친필 말씀 같은 거 이렇게 말씀 학습도 하고 그런 거 합니다. 그다음에 상식적인 좀 그런 문제에 대해서 강의 그런 것도 말해주기도 하고. 그래서.
다른 나라들은 토요일날
Political day. How about that for a concept? You haven't? It's late where I am, so I might fall asleep though. Okay. Well, welcome to the stream and thanks for your contributions. Yeah, it's probably a film that you could sleep to. It's rather dry in that art house style. But yeah, political day. What a concept, hey? Imagine if we had something like that. Like I'm sure Westerners will turn that into some type of evidence for some type of brainwashing culture, etc., etc. But if it is actually a day where people are politically active or learn about politics or political history. Yo, 4IS is in the house. What's up? Give up the rock. Yeah, propaganda day, basically. And again, propaganda as in the way that we've been speaking about it, not pejorative, okay? Not pejorative. It doesn't have to be a negative connotation. On the old propaganda can just be propaganda for the sake of people finding out stuff that they wouldn't have access to regardless. The Muffin Man, what's up? Welcome back. I have watched some of Europa. We will have to discuss that separately. Isn't that the 4th of July in the US? Yeah, and you just get the same story every year about what's going on, or Thanksgiving or something like that. But yeah, political day, interesting. If it's just outside of the usual kind of story of the nation kind of thing, and it actually gives people a chance to consider politics, that is the ideal, the liberal ideal of the pursuit of happiness. I'm up to 1. I'm still in episode 1. I'm halfway through. It's a bit much. You weren't lying when you said it was controversial. Muffin Man. Propaganda just means to propagate information. Yeah, it's something like that. Exactly. Yeah. No, not more than 4. No way. Not that far deep. But yeah, propaganda is just it's doing what the media is supposed to do, right? Because like not everyone has. She said, "Well, thank you, thank you." Yeah, the media is supposed to do propaganda, like, you know, especially in a democracy, right? Because like people are working and they got shit to do. Like not everyone can be across everything that's happening in the political world all the time. So like you need to have people that spread propaganda to kind of teach you the things that you don't have the time to read about, like all the stuff that might have happened in, I don't know, Parliament or the Congress for the day, or like what might have happened like significantly in terms of like culturally that day, socially that day, economically, environmentally, all that sort of stuff. They're supposed to just give you a snapshot, so you can stay informed. But it's supposed to obviously be unbiased as much as possible. In Western slang, propaganda is used to informally imply lies. Yes. And it drives me insane. Yes, thank you. Well, it sounds like you are on the same page as a number of us here on the stream then. So yeah, please make sure then, Cindy the Skull, you subscribe so you don't miss out on other live streams in the future. Hit the notification bell as well. But yeah, I'm really interested in political debt because, as I was saying, liberal values, right? The core of liberal societies is idea, especially in the American sense, the pursuit of happiness. Now, many people think that the pursuit of happiness is all about like, I don't know, getting consumer goods and buying stuff and it'll make you happy. That's the pursuit of happiness in like, yeah, a capitalist sense. But it's not that. In the liberal sense, it's about being politically involved. So actually being able to partake in the political makeup, the structuring of your society. And so, you know, like think about like where liberalism came from. Liberalism was like the idea of the bourgeois, which came out of like a society based on, you know, kings and aristocracies and all that sort of stuff. So like politics was never for the people. Politics was only ever for the ruling class, as in like a very specific section of the ruling class, the aristocracy, the nobles, the kings, the lords, all that sort of stuff. And so once like society became liberalized, the idea that you could actually get involved in politics was absolutely fucking revolutionary. For like no time in human history had commoners ever had political say, ever. And so the pursuit of happiness is just being able to be political, saying what you want and not being basically thrown in prison or killed for it. And so like political day is very interesting concept because that's in line with that liberal notion of the pursuit of happiness. You know, and imagine if we had something like that in like liberal societies, right? Liberal democratic societies, where we had a day where people went to lectures and shit. Like that'd be, yeah, what a strange concept. We would have rich mining people getting rewards on political day in the West. So sad, bro. Why people can't see the other side of the story. Are you scared? I'm not scared as such. I am skeptical of parts of the story. I know what you're talking about, Europa. I'm very skeptical about some of the assumptions, the underlying assumptions in it. But I'm watching it. I'm watching it like you've asked. This is taking me time. I'm busy. Capitalist sense also includes getting rich, but most who try get destroyed. Do you know the story about a bull who kidnapped Europa? LOL. No. No, I don't. But yes, sorry. Let us continue. I digress.
손님이 제일 많을 건데.
자, 금요일 오후부터라 그랬지? 금요일 오후하고 토요일 날, 일요일 날이?
예. 그렇죠. 예. 주말이. 보통 그럼 평일날은 한 어느
예?
정도
네.
사람들이 찾아와 줍니까? 몇 명 정도 대충?
요는 토요일 날 말고 다른 날이? 아니 그래서 2만 명 시켜한다고.
그렇게 많이 하루에?
네.
정말?
네.
와.
그러니까 물 자주 켜찬단 말입니다. 이거.
정말.
네. 그래서 토요일 날 옮겨놨습니다. 토요일 날에 외국인 봉사하니까 원래는 많이 하고 이런 날은 우리나라 사람들만 합니다. 뭐 이런 날은 우리 사람들 내국인도 다 이렇게 포함한단 말입니다.
그러니까 토요일 날은 외국 사람이랑 내국인이랑 다 같이.
네.
아기자기한데 누가 했습니까? 아십니까?
야, 이거 다 밑에서 이분들 오신 분들 다 도와주시고 정말 발기로부터 시작해서 시공에 이르기까지 최세의 원수님들 다 봐주십니다. 이게 하나 뜯어보게 되면 말 뜯어보면 야, 진짜 너무나도 세심하시게 이거 볼만한 게 야, 이거 다 보게 되면 원수님들 다 차려봐 주십니다. 이거 하는 거. 그래서 아마 이제 여기다 또 확장합니다. 이제.
근데 공화국 여자들은 전부 다 저 붙은 수영복이네요. 비키니가 아니라. 저 외국에는 비키니도 있거든, 떨어진 거. 위에 거 아래 거 떨어진 거. 여기 전부 다 하나씩 붙은 거다.
Yeah, it is very 50s, isn't it?
뭐 그런 거 입기만 합니다.
Not allowed to wear bikinis.
우리 거 이거 뭐야게 지금 우리 풍습하고 저희 내가 그런 것도 계속 그렇고 그다음에 정책적으로 이거 만약 이거 적들이 지금 우리 사람들 우리 이게 우리나라 살지 지금 우리나라 하나밖에 없는 거 거리밥다 시켜서 어떻게 무너져 보려고 이런 사상적인 심리 문학교는 뭐 이렇게 많이 지금 썩고병된 자기네 문화교를 좀 넣지 않습니까? 그러니까 우리가 단단히 차단하는데 그래서 그 일환으로서 그런 것도 있습니다.
That's really interesting, isn't it? Hey, dirty, capitalistic smut not allowed here because like it ideologically undermines what we're doing. Very interesting concept, eh? Very interesting concept. No way. Damn. Damn, I thought this was too good to be true. All right, I don't know if you guys can see me or hear me. Well. It's bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. I was really enjoying that documentary as well. Such a shame that we're getting censored again. All right, well, I have to learn lessons from this. That like we got like half an hour in that before we get censored. All right, whatever. Well, we can't do that one. Like the only way I can do this stuff is on Twitch because I can't get censored over there. So like I don't know if you guys or if anyone in the chat or the stream is available to go on Twitch, but like I will continue this story tomorrow, and I will continue looking at that, and looking at that documentary over there. We need to time videos and see if there is a threshold. Yeah, because like last time it was like we were an hour and a bit in to the stream. This time we've been watching for like, I don't know, half an hour or something. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to do that. I don't use Twitch, but I'll try and use it to watch you. Thank you. I appreciate that. But like I might have to do this type of stuff over on Twitch. Like this is bullshit. Really, honestly. Like what's the point? Why have it on YouTube if you can't watch it? Like we're just watching it. I'm not ripping it. Are you gonna change topics? No, I'm gonna do Korea, but I'm gonna look at someone that I haven't looked at in ages. Try and give their explanation of how Korean society works, or sorry, North Korea works, kind of thing. It's a person called Vicky, 1999. I'm not sure if you have come across this person before. But they are a leftist, I guess you would say, content creator. And they did do an interesting piece explaining how North Korea works. And I thought, if we can't watch what life is like in North Korea, let's try and understand like North Korean society a little bit better. And so like I think they do a really good breakdown of how North Korea works. And so like if people aren't across the story of Korea, effectively they were under Japanese occupation before the war, I think, from the end of the 19th century onwards. And yeah, like after Japan kind of surrendered, like Korea was like liberated, and Korea effectively had like socialist movements, and like in the north and the south we're talking about here. There's a person on YouTube called Peter Fairlie, and his thing is hacking TV of isolated countries, especially North Korea, and then plays it on live streams. That's awesome. Yeah, I've like downloaded from archive.org North Korean TV before, like a 10-hour like recording of North Korean TV, and it's fucking mental. Like I have no idea what they're saying, obviously, but it's very colorful and musical, and like lots of people waving, and like lots of stories kind of about like I guess the country, and like their military history and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I would suggest it if you ever get a chance to watch some North Korean TV, because like it is like kind of going like taking a trip back in time. Like you could even see at that swimming pool, that aquatic center, it was like almost 1950s, but not like the colors and everything, but like everything looked fresh as, but like, yeah, still like kind of trapped in a very 20th century vibe kind of thing. But yeah, Korea was it was getting its liberation at this time, right? And like there were socialist parties like all over, like groups all over Korea, especially in the south, not just the north. And they were looking to liberate, like unify the country. That was what Korea was trying to do once the Japanese took off. They wanted to become Korea. And basically, the Soviets were in the northern part, obviously, like with China as well. So like there was communism going on, and the Americans were pretty much just worried about the whole peninsula going to the communists. They didn't want that to happen. They wanted a connection to the mainland, I guess you would say, somehow. They had Japan, but they didn't want China and like Russia basically to take, yes, that whole landmass, let's say. And so they set up a base in the south, and like the Soviets and the Americans basically were like, after being allied during the war, quickly turned on each other straight away. And they were basically like, look, let's just cut this place in half. And like the Korean people were just like, what about us? And they were just like, yeah, whatever. And so like they literally just cut them off from one another. And so the story goes that there was a bit of like toing and froing. And like, again, as I was saying before, like the communist or socialistic vibe in that country, especially from a national liberation and national unity perspective, was pretty high. And so like the socialists in the South were kind of like, hey, let's unify, and like the communists that were in the North were kind of like, yeah, let's do this. And so like, you know, the North invaded the South, and then the Americans ramped up the pressure and they pushed the North all the way to basically the edge of China, and then China got involved, and then they pushed, like the Chinese and the North Koreans pushed back, like past beyond the divide and stuff like that, and then like they ended up settling along the demilitarized zone. So that's like the halfway mark where Korea has just been sliced in half, literally. So like it looks really awkward, because it is awkward, because someone's just gotten a map out and said like, all right, everyone, you go on this half of the line, and everyone else on this half of the line. And so like that's how we got to the North and the South. And so like we were saying before, the North might be a dictatorship, okay? It might be a communistic dictatorship, but the South was a capitalistic dictatorship then. There was no like, you know, democracy and stuff like that. It was an American base, basically, with an American puppet in there, who controlled the South on behalf of the Americans, and basically the North was kind of run in line with the way the Soviets wanted to do things. And then when the Soviets kind of started dropping away, it was probably more influenced by the Chinese, which is what we've ended up with today. So that's like the long and the short of it when it comes to Korea. And so like I think this video does a good job of like helping to explain that in Vicky's usual style. So but then foreign intervention and Korean War prevented any peace or unity in the region. And I think that is the saddest part about all of this, to be honest, is just like, is like the Korean people, like, you know, the world got together, like all the biggest powers at the time were just like, all right, fine, we'll take half, you take half, kind of thing. And like I said, the Koreans kind of was like, hello, we would like to be a unified like group, unified culture, like kind of thing. And hence the name of the documentary we were just watching, you know, My Brothers and Sisters in the North. Like, you know, they all see themselves as a unified culture and a unified people. And, you know, no thanks, like they were more like unified under the Japanese than like thanks to the Americans and the Soviets. But like the Koreans really, like the North Koreans, that is, because like they were up against the force of the Americans, like they really had to double down on the whole military dictatorship kind of thing. Like really, like to make this work, if they were going to withstand the power of the Americans. And like we're not just talking about like the Americans just setting up a base and like patrolling the wall to make sure North Koreans didn't get over the line or something like this. Like Chomsky described what happened in North Korea as the Americans bombing the Koreans into the Stone Age. Now, Chomsky's not one, I don't think, to really exaggerate a story, but like he does describe a lot. My first censorship today. Oh, your first of the day. Well, you've done well. Was saying they would be powerful if they worked together. Yeah, and it'd be problematic because you know what? The history goes, they probably would have tried out some form of socialism or something like that, or workers' control, or, you know, let's say some type of people's republic, as opposed to a bourgeois republic that could be easily used to the whims of, you know, foreign capitalists and like the strategic interests of the Americans. But yeah, the North Koreans really had to double down because like they literally just got smashed by the Americans during the Korean War. Like the Americans seem to have had a lot of surplus from World War II. And when I say surplus, I mean like surplus bombs, right? And like the Koreans and the Soviets who was assisting them, no air power in this part of the world. So the Koreans, nothing in like the sense of having an air force. So the Americans literally just like flew over North Korea and just like literally bombed them into almost non-existence, like into the Stone Age, in the sense that like at certain points they were just like, oh, we've got nothing else. There's no military targets. So like, let's just start bombing civilian stuff. Like, let's bomb that dam over there. Or like, let's bomb that infrastructure and stuff like that. And so they were just using the North Koreans as like target practice, I guess, and like getting rid of their surplus military gear. Same in Indochina. Same was, yeah, which was what they did to in Cambodia and Laos. Which is like, Vietnam gets all of the credit, like, it went through a lot of bad stuff. So did Cambodia, but like, Laos, like there's a lot of stuff that the Americans were just getting off their hands, like kind of thing, so that they could justify more and higher military budgets and spending because they've used a lot of their arsenal and stuff like that. So like, unfortunately, that's actually more of a like capitalistic problem, I would say, because like, capitalism kind of like the military industrial complex, they want to make money off selling and producing like bombs basically and like military technology. And so like they have to kind of get rid of stuff as well to be able to turn around to Congress and ask for more spending and more money. So like they got rid of it all right, and they got rid of it to like really badly in North Korea. They got rid of their excess bombs and stuff like that, and they got rid of a lot of it too in Indochina, in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos. All that region was literally just bombed, just for the sake of it, like just for the sake of it. And people wonder why, like, these North Koreans, like when they talk about the West and stuff like that, or like, I don't know, have some type of fanatical view of like their leader who saved them from like the Americans. Like, the people in the West wonder why. And it's just like, well, these people almost didn't exist because of the Americans at a certain point in their history. So like, it's not hard to see how they would have thought. How they've come up with these types of ideologies and come up with these ways of structuring their societies and stuff. The USA owned over 50% of the world's wealth after World War II, and by the 70s it was under 25%, according to Chomsky. That's interesting. They had to spread it out a little bit, hey, the Americans. But like, after World War II, like that was it. Like Europe was completely destroyed, and like outside of Europe, like most countries were not even really developed. So the wealth was probably shared only between Europe, America, and like Japan, I guess. It's like the Big Lebowski's. You're not wrong. Famous line. Bretton Woods. Yes. I called it in a stream the other day, the Bretton Woods dynasty. And I'm going to continue using that because it was like an economic dynasty, right? Like the Chinese had a the Ming dynasty that decided to use silver, and then that became the world currency. Silver became the world tradable good, the world currency, in order to stimulate global trade. So anyway, I will shut up and let's have a look at Vicky 99's interpretation, which I don't think is... We're going to get kicked off. I don't know, but like, let's have a crack.
Experience Botanica's aerosol-free auto spray, infused with fragrances inspired by nature.
It established economic hegemony. Yes. And like, look, we got some ads, so we're doing something well. We're helping the machine.
Hello, everybody. We're talking about North Korea today. As you know, North Korea is unique in that it is one of the last remaining Cold War-era socialist nations. And it's notable for having a far bigger...
See, that's interesting, because that guy at the swimming pool, the North Korean dude, was just like, we're the last socialistic country left. I was like, fuck, that's a big call. But like, like talk about like building up some national mythology, right? Like, if you've convinced your people, or if you've convinced yourself kind of thing, like, we're the last bastion of hope, the last socialistic country left. Or like we're the only socialistic country. Like I wonder what the Chinese would say about that, because they consider themselves to be socialists and communists. So like, pretty big neighbor to say, hey, you're not even a real socialist too, especially because they have quite the relationship, the two of them. We'd have to investigate that in a stream one day, what the real relationship is between North Korea and China and stuff like that, how that actually works. But yes. Interesting that like they consider themselves to be one of the last socialist nations left.
Impact on the world stage than you would expect from such a small country. There are many myths and legends around North Korea and its government, and I will try to address as many of those as I can. we're going to go over the history, politics, and economics of North Korea, and we'll hopefully learn something new. That being said, let's start. Korea has lots of history, as you may know. I will skip over most of it. So, by 1910, Japan had conquered and occupied all of Korea. They developed some industry, mostly in the north for geographical reasons. This grew the industrial working class. North Korea has many mountains, and anti-imperialist guerrilla fighters were using them to harass the Japanese army and government. Eventually, the Japanese client states in Korea and Manchuria were invaded/liberated by the Soviet Union at the end of World War II. While the Soviets were advancing, many people's committees formed all across Korea and wanted to govern. When the Soviets reached Pyongyang, they found a socialist government made up of representatives from these councils. Naturally, they allied with them. Because this is the Cold War, the Americans couldn't accept that all of Korea may be ruled by these committees, so they talked to the Soviet Union, and after some negotiation, they decided to split the country on this line, which is the 38th parallel on a map. The North would be socialist and the South would be anti-socialist, aka fascist. It wouldn't become a democracy until decades later. The Soviets promoted and supported a prominent guerrilla fighter called Kim Il-sung, and he quickly took over the government. He then structured the country and its economy after the Soviet model. We'll see that in the politics and economics sections. At first, Kim Il-sung assumed that there would be a revolution in the South, considering the South had just as many people's councils and genuine socialists as the North. But when peaceful protesters were repeatedly brutally oppressed by the Southern government, he realized that there would be no revolution in the South. So he decided to take it upon himself to liberate the people of the South. He got permission from...
Okay, so here it is. Okay, here is the divergence in the Western narrative. Okay, like the Western narrative about this is just like evil communists in the north of Korea wanted to expand their territory, so they invaded the South, and that's pretty much like the nexus for the Korean War. Now, if you look at it from this socialist perspective, which is what we're getting from Vicky 1999 here, it's kind of like, well, actually, there were socialists all over the country, and the North Koreans knew that, and they were basically waiting to unite with the socialists in the South, but that was never going to happen, especially under American auspices. And so they decided to connect the dots physically and cross the line and go in and unify Korea under, obviously, a socialist venture or an anti-capitalist venture, let's call it for now. And so that is very different. Like talking about always having two sides of the story, etc., which the Muffin Man would agree with. There's your two sides of the story there. And the answer is probably somewhere in the middle. The North Koreans probably did want to unify the country, but they wanted to unify the country, obviously, under the guise or under the leadership of the governmental system that they had set up based on the Soviet style. Whether or not the South Korean socialists wanted the same thing exactly as what the North had created, we'll never fucking know now. But the South Koreans probably didn't want the Americans around either. They probably wanted to figure out their own politics in their own nation. So South Korea is better defined as being capitalist, but in a less restricted sense compared to America, as big business has immense control and influence by comparison. I have heard that too, as being capitalist, but in a less restricted sense. I've really heard that there's some massive corporations that basically control the entirety of Korea. And so it's really, really monopolistic, oligopoly kind of capitalism over there in South Korea, which kind of, I guess, makes sense, because they were a bit of a production house for world capitalism, especially in the the I guess the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. A lot of production for the advanced capitalist Western countries was coming out of Korea, and they made a lot of money for themselves, the Koreans, these big corporations, that is, in Korea. But like, yeah, you can see this is where the Western narrative kind of diverts from potentially reality here. It's not just like the communists wanted to just kill South Koreans and hated them with a passion. They wanted to unify their country, and they wanted to help, I guess, liberate them from American occupation, actually. So,
Decided to take it upon him, realized that those were repeatedly, brutally oppressed by the Southern government. He realized that there would be no revolution in the South, so he decided to take it upon himself to liberate the people of the South. He got permission from Stalin and promises of support from China. On top of that, America withdrew all its troops from the South, leaving them with only inexperienced South Korean soldiers. The Northern Army, on the other hand, had a corps of veterans who had fought the Japanese. On top of that, they got new military equipment from their Soviet allies, while America didn't even trust the South with any tanks. 5 years after being liberated by the Soviets, the Northern Army launched an invasion/liberation of the South. Because of all these factors, the North won quickly, advancing through almost the entire country in 3 months. The international community did not like this. The UN, under the leadership of the USA, led a multinational intervention force, which of course was superior to the by comparison small North Korean army. I will skip over the war crimes and just say that the North was pushed all the way back to the Chinese border, at which point the Chinese People's Liberation Army joined the war and pushed the border all the way back to the 38th parallel. When they reached that point, they negotiated a ceasefire. The border was almost exactly the same as before. There would be a 4-kilometer wide demilitarized zone between the two countries. This still exists until today, and there has been no peace, only a never-ending ceasefire. After the war, and with Chinese and Soviet support...
Pretty tense, right? Because that's what I've heard about, like, being in Korea, either side of the wall. But, like, you obviously hear this from South Koreans, is, like, they're pretty stressed out because, like, all the stuff that they get from their media all the time is just, like, watching over the wall to see what the North Koreans are doing, testing missiles and all that sort of stuff. And so, like, because they're not actually... There's no peace between them, just I guess a never-ending ceasefire. Like, you know, it could be broken at any point, and so like it's not conducive to having people that are, you know, not anxiety filled on either side of that demilitarized zone, especially if the South Koreans know that the North Koreans have like all of these nuclear weapons, and so like, you know, who else better to test it out on than like, you know, someone in easy range. But like, if you believe this discussion and this narrative that is being told here from the, I guess, the Soviet perspective or the socialist perspective, like, I would find it very hard to believe that the North Koreans would want to actually unleash a nuclear missile on the South Koreans, because like, they're Koreans too. And like, their gripe isn't against Koreans. It's against the imperialist West, like, kind of thing. So South Korea is better defined as being capitalist. China isn't socialist. North Korea and South Korea both almost conquered the region at different points of the war. Yes, which is what we're speaking about here. S-side rates are extremely high in Korea for several reasons. Yeah, there's a lot of cash for the politicians.
North Korea experienced a post-war economic boom, which lasted until the 80s, at which point the economy stagnated. More on that in the economics section. By 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. This was a major problem for Korea. They imported almost all of their food from the USSR, so the fact that the USSR ceased to exist caused major food shortages. It also caused a lot of economic hardship, as China was left as the only ally and trade partner of the country. This only strengthened North Korea's belief in self-reliance. It's a core feature of the Juche idea. I have a video on that. Essentially, they want to be economically and militarily independent of all other nations. This is why they have an army of 6 million, because they want to be able to hold off a full-scale American invasion on their own. And that's why they are spending so much effort on making nukes and ICBMs. It's about defending themselves from other countries, mostly the USA. The logic goes that nobody wants to be nuked, so nobody will invade them. Basically the concept of the Cold War on a small scale. Nowadays, Korea has mixed relations with China, among other things because of the continued nuclear tests, which have been condemned by the entire international community. China still supports North Korea, if only to avoid a unified Korea which is friendly to the Americans. South Korea and the USA, on the other hand, aren't exactly friends of North Korea. Their relations are somewhat improving. For example, in 2019, the US President and the Supreme Leader of Korea met. The South Korean President also met with him the same year. Nothing else has come of this, but it's a nice gesture, I guess. Talking about Supreme Leader, who's that? The answer lies in the politics section.
So you've probably seen the posters or even heard about the show. But there's a side of Shen Yun that you won't see.
Starting to get ads for Chinese stuff. Right, the algorithm is learning. It's only taken like a week of doing streams on like Chinese culture and history, and now looking into North Korea, we're going to start to get Chinese cultural ads. It's happening. We're training the algorithm. This is what we need to do. This is what we all need to do. Train our algorithms to serve us. So many genuine ads in the subways. It's taken the world by storm. Taking the world by storm. Supreme Leader as a title is detestable. It is detestable. And I agree. And like I said at the beginning of the stream, when I first like kind of introduced everything, like I am not convinced. Like there's a lot of people that I don't know how else to call them. They're like communists and socialists that are like tankies, I guess, who are just like, no, it's fine. Like it's all just like, you know, everything about like anything you think about like how that family came to power, the Kims, you know, it's all just Western propaganda. They're actually, you know, benevolent leaders and everything's fine, and like no one actually does anything wrong over there, and everything's like all hunky-dory. It's all just like Western propaganda, so don't worry about it. Like I'm not of that opinion. I'm sure like having a literally a dynasty, an aristocracy is not a good thing. Like, you know, socialism is tied to the idea of democracy. And like, you know, you can have, I get it, you can have workers control in many forms. You can have workers control where they kind of elect to have a leader, right? And so like you can argue that the way that they've structured their society, and you'll see that politically in this video, is that like, you know, the political apparatus has been kind of moved in such a way that like, you know, the party has voted them into power, so that's how they got there, and then the party made the decision that they were going to be supreme leaders, and they keep getting voted into that, or the party decides as a unit. But like, you know, socialism is really about democratic control of the working class. So like, you know, having a lifelong ruler and having a rulers that kind of transgress over generations is antithetical to that like core principle of workers' democratic control. I'm not talking about like this kind of fanciful and blind democracy where everybody gets a turn like kind of thing and everyone's involved in the democratic system. I get the dictatorship of the proletariat, and that's reserved for workers and stuff like that. But like I'm not fully convinced by it at all, and I'm not like that style of, I guess, tanky. I don't know how else to call these types of communists that are just like, you know, like the people that are Stalinist apologists as well. And like everything that's ever been said about Stalin is wrong, and it's just like Western propaganda. He was fine. He never killed anyone. He never did the wrong thing kind of thing. I'm like, I don't know about this. And this is why I wanted to watch that documentary, because like we could learn about the Korean people, the North Korean people, as opposed to just being hit with like propaganda about the ruling family and stuff like that. Detestable, but at least it's honest. Supreme Leader as a title is as their title is detestable, as no one should have that much power. We need to start a new YouTube that is open source. Yeah. One family ruling a nation is called monarchy, and Korea had that before. Look at what happened as a result. Detestable, but at least it was honest. Elon Musk's dictatorship video would be interesting too. And like, I think that's an interesting point about like the fact that they had a monarchy before. Like, look at China, like in the sense that like we've just looked at a lot of Chinese history over the last week and a bit. David, welcome, by the way. It's been a long time since we've seen you on a stream. I'm glad you're able to actually to make one, unless you've just been watching in the background because you've been busy at work or something. But, thanks for joining the chat. Yeah, like we've just watched a lot of like Chinese history and stuff, and like Chinese, like for forever have had like dynasties and emperors and all that sort of stuff, warlords and like, autocratic rule. Okay. And so like for them to have a one party system now and to have like one person that is kind of like, the commander in chief, let's say, like Xi Jinping, like who is now assumed control for life. Like it's not too far of a stretch for them culturally to be able to want to look at things economically from a socialist standpoint and use the teachings of, I guess, the lessons from Marxism and communist experiments of the 20th century, but then politically organize themselves like they have been doing for thousands of years under like almost monarchies and autocratic regimes. So like, the blending of the cultures there is like, this is our cultural values, this is how we organize ourselves politically, and we're okay with that. But like economically, we'll look to using communism and Marxism to, so like if you think about things culturally, this type of stuff makes a little bit more sense. And it's more the fact that like Western society projects onto these cultures, like projects onto the Koreans, the North Koreans, or projects onto the Chinese that, hey, in the West or in capitalist nations, we are liberal democracies and anything outside of that is plain evil. But for these people, it's obviously not that big of a deal. They don't see everything politically through a Western lens. So it's something that we should take into consideration. But it is detestable from the sense that, like, if you give someone supreme rule powers, they can do some pretty crazy shit. And, like, that is antithetical to, like, the socialist project, which is about giving workers control of the economy. And, like, to be honest, that has to be done in a democratic sense. Do you think it has something to do with the difference between collectivists versus individualistic culture? I think, like as I was saying, I think these Eastern cultures see a delineation between the economics of it and the politics of it. Like they've been for, like I've said, for centuries, if not thousands of years, they have run themselves politically as a unit. And they've respected a certain structure, and whether that's a pyramid structure or not doesn't matter. They seem to like they respect the way that it functions. Like it's very Confucian in the Chinese sense, and like they had like the ultimate bureaucracy for a long time. So like supplanting a communist model on top of an existing hardcore bureaucracy, not that hard to do. And so like if they culturally are fine with the politics of like an autocracy, but like they want to get to be a good industrial nation and a player in a free market global world, they want to take on some Marxist principles and some communistic and socialist principles to a certain extent. That's what I think they are doing. I think it's individualistic in the sense, like from the West, that like the West believes in the power of like all these free individuals who are able to freely exchange with one another, and that's the individualistic sense. And so like you have a group of individuals who all come together and vote in a Republican style political system, like a whole sea of individuals who come together to vote for representatives that take on that job full time because all the other people are out there pursuing their own individual interests. So there is a sense of individualism in the Republican parliamentary style of political undertaking, where the Eastern flavor, where it's like, no, we all know our place in society. I don't care if I'm at the bottom and there's someone above me in the hierarchy kind of thing. We work as a unit. as a large organ, like an organ, like a, if you used an analogy with the human body kind of thing, or like any type of organic life form, like all the components work together to make a functioning whole. And so, yeah, in the collective sense in that regard is like they all kind of work together, and whether that's stratified and some people are on top and some people don't, they don't care, because like I said, they work as a unit. So yeah, there's that element in their culture and their politics and their economics. So like, you know, like I was saying before, very easy to supplant a particular style of communistic ideology on top of a society that has those values and those cultural tendencies already built into it. And that's why I think Leninism, not Lenin himself, but Leninism, so Marxist Leninism, is pretty fucking dangerous too, because like it normalized for a lot of people the idea of just being like, yeah, well, if the party has to take control and do whatever it needs to survive, then that's acceptable. And like it is in the face of like some type of capitalistic imperialist onslaught that just wants to annihilate you. But like it doesn't do anything to producing an actual communistic way of living, where a society based on no classes and absolute individual freedom, it doesn't really put you on that trajectory. It just helps you set up your economy better and like understand how to deal with capitalism better. But anyway, massive tangent. Apologies. Let's get back to it.
The supreme leader is, of course, you know him and you love/hate him, the one and only Kim Jong-un. He's the son of Kim Jong-il and the grandson of the guerrilla resistance fighter from earlier, Kim Il-sung. Now, these are all related to each other, which leads to people who don't know how the North Korean state is constructed to compare it to monarchy. This is so extreme that when they thought Kim Jong-un died a few months ago, they looked at the family history to try to determine the successor, which is not how it works. Believe it or not, North Korea is not a monarchy, and the supreme leader is in fact selected or elected, depending on definitions, and just because a total of 2 times they selected people from the same family doesn't make it monarchist. After Castro died, his brother took over. Are we therefore to conclude that Cuba is a monarchy? Of course not. Political dynasties are pretty common, especially without term limits. Of course, there's this weird cult of personality around these 3 guys, but they were all elected to their positions. North Korea is not a monarchy, it's a one-party state with nepotism. But how is the supreme leader selected? Time to look at what the title of supreme leader even means. It sounds like a shorthand title for dictator in a bad movie, but in the North Korean constitution, it is an official title given to the president of the State Affairs Commission, currently Kim Jong-un, previously the other 2. Now you're bound to wonder what the State Affairs Commission does. Essentially, it's a commission which checks every part of the government. It supervises the cabinet, which I'll come to later, and it supervises the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of State Security, and Ministry of Social Security. This commission used to be called the National Defense Commission, which gives you a look at what it's like. Kim Jong-un is also Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces of North Korea, which means he's Commander-in-Chief, but that's a separate position. Essentially, the task of the 14 members of the State Affairs Commission is to supervise every part of the government to make sure they are ready to work together for defense of the country. Americans may have long forgotten about the war in Korea, but they haven't. The state is still practically in a state of war, ready to oppose a military invasion at any time. But if this commission is so powerful, how were the members selected? By the Supreme People's Assembly, essentially the North Korean parliament. The parliament votes on a president of the State Affairs Commission, who then appoints the 13 other positions, and the parliament has to confirm these appointments. The parliament also votes on new laws and changes to the constitution. It is unicameral again, meaning there's only one elected body. The members are selected by the 687 constituencies for 5-year terms. These are local elections. The way they work is that anyone above...
So, interesting, right? It's like very standard parliamentary style politics in the way that we would think about it in the West. that you have a representative like that's like voted through a local body or a local constituency, and then that member goes and represents you in the, I don't know, the Congress or the Parliament, and then the Parliament, those body of representatives choose their leaders and sanction whatever leaders they have and stuff like that. But again, like this is a one-party system, so if you are voting for a local representative, they're within the party. So yeah, there's one thing that'll change things for the better. It's for more tankies. For the better. It's for more tankies and authoritarian apologists to get a slight taste of reality. I've often thought that, never really articulated it, but like, you know, someone had to say it. You know, you will have to experience a bit of authoritarianism to, and like the dark part of authoritarianism, to like kind of really understand how scary that type of stuff can get. Happy to be here. Good, David. In one party system, it's party time all the time. Yeah, it is party time all the time in multiple senses of the use of that 4AS. I see what you did there.
The age of 17 can be a candidate, and then before the election the Communist Party meets and decides on one candidate per district, who is then the one candidate people can vote on. Of course, technically anyone can be in the Communist Party, so indirectly anyone can influence on who the candidate will be, but practically the Communist Party is in charge of who becomes a member of parliament. Because of this, the parliament is majority Korean Workers' Party, and it has been since the war. As is typical in this series, the Supreme People's Assembly only meets a few times a year to do the tasks like changing the constitution. And what do they do when not in session? Say it all together now. They elect a committee to take over the tasks of the parliament when it is not in session. This standing committee of the Supreme People's Assembly has 15 members. They are not officially employed anywhere else, and in theory they're independent of things like the party and the supreme leader, while they make decisions about legislation. Next is the Cabinet of North Korea, which is essentially a council of ministers. All the ministers are in the cabinet. They're appointed by the Supreme People's Assembly, aka the parliament. They essentially run the executive part of government. The parliament says what they want to happen, and the executive goes about doing that thing. Having talked about the executive and the legislative, only one branch remains, the judiciary. The members of the High Court are selected by Parliament. There are also provincial and special city-level courts, which are selected by the equivalent local government. Nothing too exciting. As the People's Republic of Korea is a one-party state, that party is kind of significant. It's called the Workers' Party of Korea. The party has local organizations on all levels. On the national level, the main body is the Party Congress, made up of the party representatives from all around the country. The Congress votes on the chairman of the party, currently Kim Jong-un. They also elect the Central Committee of the Communist Party, which, as you guessed, is a body that takes over the tasks of the Congress while it is not in session.
So he is the head of the Communist Party, but he's also the head of like the political organization, so the head of their parliament or their political structure. So he's the head of the party, he's the head of the political institution, so starting to sound more and more supreme. It's probably better than techno-feudalism or whatever the US is heading towards. You have a massive gripe for techno-feudalism. I think a few of us in this stream have a big gripe with it as well. Look, if it is truly like workers and like what they're doing is like truly trying to move towards some form of socialist society, like democratizing the means of production, then yes. But like, you know, being in a constant state of warfare, like the way that they've set up their structure, basically to be ready at any point to go to war, like with America or something like that, just in case they get invaded. Like, it's a very particular form of political structuring. And like, you know, it is the best way to justify kind of like an erosion of people's actual democratic control over political processes and stuff like that is to be living in a constant state of war. Because then you can really justify a lot of stuff. You can justify a lot of atrocities too. So my view is that Asians tend to tolerate authoritarian governments as long as they enjoy prosperity. Yeah, and there's that kind of Confucian ideal there, which is kind of like, you know, everyone works together, and like as long as everyone's like they can see there's progress and everyone's moving in the same direction and stuff like that, then they're happy to live and be kind of told what to do if they have to, and like accept their lot in life as long as like, you know, the system is working. They're very much like systematic in that sense. And like I said, I think that is a part of their philosophy. I have to agree with that. I think they have a pretty brutal caste system as well. Who are we talking about here? Like the North Koreans? Or is this a side conversation?
They also selected a central auditioning commission who observe what everyone is doing in the government
North
while the
Korea,
Congress is out of session. The influence of the Communist Party is not to be ignored. They impact many layers of the government. For example, the way I told it, there is no way for Kim Jong-un to influence the lawmakers. After all, he's in the executive branch, running the military commission, not in parliament. And the High Court may seem independent the way I told it. The Communist Party is key to how it actually works. Sure, legally speaking, the Supreme Leader has no way to enact a law, but a Communist Party chairman could tell his party comrades to enact a law. And since the Communist Party rules the parliament, the chairman can effectively enact any law he wants to. Who was chairman again? Oh yeah, the Supreme Leader himself, Kim Jong-un. For similar reasons, the High Court only ever has members of the Communist Party in it. And sure, anyone can stand for election, but if you aren't in the party, they will select someone else for your constituency. And remember, it's one candidate per constituency. And naturally, all high positions which are theoretically elected by the parliament, like ministers and judges, are effectively decided on by the Central Committee of the party. The party believes in Juche, which is a long story, and I already made a video on that, so go watch that. After this one, let us finally come to the economics.
So Juche is like Korean socialism? Is their particular brand of dealing with it? So like if you had like, I don't know, Leninism, which is a particular brand of like socialism, so advanced on the workings of Marx as given to us by the great Vladimir Lenin. Like Juche would be the Korean version of socialism based on Marxist principles. It's about being self-sufficient. Yes. Well, like in the face of, you know, great imperialist adversity. So like they've set up a system which, you know, follows the socialist doctrine with their own unique cultural elements, which is what we've actually been talking about for a while, right? Like this cultural nuance on top of like the socialist trajectory, which is not unusual, right? Because like, you know, even like kind of Marx and all of that would have spoken about having like to kind of face the reality of like whatever cultural nuance or nationalistic nuance that you're looking at, like it would, whatever anti-capitalist struggle you would have been going through, like to overthrow the bourgeois system based on exchange, like you would have to have done that in a way that responds to your own like national constraints and limitations. And so like, you know, these people have adopted Juche, which is like a battle plan, a set of objectives that will like kind of meet their specific needs. And especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, where like they were really, it's all about being self-reliant now. Like you really, there's no one else you can depend on. You have to make sure everything can be done in-house. And like, can we just say, in the globalized like world that we live in, who the hell lives like that? Like there really is no country that is like completely cut off from the global system. Like all countries under the capitalist umbrella, so like world capitalism, rely on world trade and commerce and like, you know, international diplomacy and geopolitics to some degree. some degree. The fact that like the North Koreans are like almost completely ostracized from the entire planet and still have an aquatic center like the one we saw is just like is notable. I think we should pay that. It was a sick aquatic center, and I want to go for a swim.
The platypus is such a special and unique animal, found only here in Australia, but they're disappearing fast. Tree clearing.
Economic goals are decided by the Central Committee of the party, and the State Planning Committee is tasked with implementing them. It's a Soviet-style planned economy. After the Korean War, the North was completely destroyed because of the intense American bombardment that took place. This was, of course, very bad for the people, but it was actually good for the economy. You see, when a country is destroyed and people lose everything, then they will seek a job and buy all the products they lost during the war. And if everyone buys one of everything, that means strong economic growth. This is why you see an economic boom happening after every major destructive war. And the same thing hit North Korea. In addition to that, North Korea got lots of international aid from the USSR and China, because socialist nations support each other. There was tremendous economic growth and improvement in living standards between the war and the 80s. In this period, North Korea was actually doing better than the South in almost every way. Of course, the economic miracles stopped when the people had replaced all products. This caused economic stagnations in the 80s. But as I said before, stagnation doesn't mean things are getting worse. It just means things don't change.
I don't think this is a really important point as well. Okay, so like a massive and significant component of a capitalist economy, and we've talked about this in streams as well, is the idea of creating the perception of consumption, and like not just like making sure that people perceive it as in like, oh, I know that there is a television, a flat screen television that I could put in my lounge room. It's like not just making sure people understand there's a flat screen television, but like constructing and manufacturing their desire for the flat screen television. So if you have a socialist country where like, you know, everyone needs something because like, yeah, everything's been destroyed in the war, like you have people consuming stuff because they need to fill up all of those goods in there and those articles of consumption. And so like things are productive, things are working quite well, and like they're consuming. And then once people start to catch up a bit, and like you don't have marketing and advertising telling people to consume more all the time, you will have stagnation in an economy, even a capitalistic one. And so like if you don't have the advertising machine that you have in the West telling people to perpetually consume, and you won't be happy unless you can keep consuming because of, you know, FOMO or something like that, or you don't want to look stupid, so make sure you have the latest stuff. Like in this Korean sense, if they were producing like kind of for use and people had what they needed to use, there would be a level of stagnation. Now, capitalism deals with that. But if you're doing planned economics and stuff like that, you know, you will reach a limit where you have serviced your population. And the question is, what do you do after that? Do you recycle everything and just keep producing? And like you could figure that out, but like if that coincides also like on this map with a time where like you get cut off from the rest of the world in its entirety and you have to look in on yourself, you're going to go backwards, like, because like now you can't rely on anyone from the outside, and like things are going to get pretty heavy pretty fast. We should measure economics on efficiency of resources and how much stuff we don't need to replace. What type of fantasy world are you living in? Wouldn't that be wonderful if we actually measured on economics on actual efficiency of resources? You know, as opposed to the overproduction which we do live in, like, you know, the pursuit of actual profit being the driving force for all economic production and stimulation. Yeah, imagine if we had like ethical production. The good one. I like it. Funny. But like you can see the problem of dealing with that style of production though. It's fine when people need a lot of stuff, but as you get good at servicing your population, it will stagnate. And so you got to manufacture desire if you want to keep on producing. But like if they were truly socialist though, right? Like they would have been able to deal with the stagnation part. I do recognize though that around the same point it looks as like that says 1989 there, as the Soviet Union fell, they started declining in their GDP. I'm sure that would have a relation to one another. Anyway, let us
change much. But then 1991 happened and the socialist world collapsed. This was a hard hit for the North Korean economy. It was largely focused on heavy industry and not on farming. They got most food by trading with the Soviet Union. After Gorbachev introduced Pizza Hut, the new Russian Federation didn't want to trade with the communist nation anymore.
He's such a
Not
smart
to
ass.
mention the Russian economy was in free fall as well. On top of that, droughts and floods caused food production to decrease, and that meant famine. The death toll varies wildly depending on who you ask, and there are no numbers from the Korean government itself. It's somewhere in the range of 200 to 500,000. The starvation was eventually ended by international aid coming from unexpected places like South Korea and the USA. Nowadays, the Korean economy is very much focused on self-reliance, both because that is a core part of the duty idea and because of economic reality. There is barely anyone to trade with Korea because most nations are capitalist and they consider North Korea an evil dictatorship that eats babies. The only trade partner for Korea is China. And even that trade is very little nowadays. North Korea is under an international embargo because of the nuclear tests, so no country or company can legally trade with anyone in North Korea. This is also why it seems like the North hasn't been developing since the 90s. It's because the 90s were the last time they had access to outside technology. You often see Western media focus on this. For example, a proof that North Korea is bad is that they have subway cards which are from the 80s and things which break, like a ceiling light, are not replaced. Completely neglecting the fact that North Korea cannot import spare parts and North Korea flat out doesn't have the industry to produce every little thing. You need a global economy to reach the standards of living we have in the West.
That's a really good point, okay? Like really something that we should reflect on and consider ourselves is that like in the capitalist world, which is what we all live in, them included, to have these items, like to have industrial scale, advanced country worthy ways of life, you need a global economy for that. Like there is no country on earth that is large enough, like even China, like to produce all of the stuff you need for an advanced industrial civilization. Like, you know, China's got like fucking 1 billion people and like, you know, it was the industrial powerhouse of the world, but they still need to import things like raw materials even to like make that type of industrial and advanced economy work. And like geographically even, no one has access to everything. Like it's one of the most sustainable, I think, populations ever. And this is just by absolute sheer geographical luck are the Americans. Like they really do have all of the resources and things at their disposal because of the vast territory that is like the North American continent, that like they could really make it work if they had to. And like, you know, spanning such an expanse, like 2 oceans on either side, trade with like South America too, like just physical connection to South America, like a massive part of the world's land mass. So like the Americans are quite lucky in that regard, to have such an expanse of resources to rely on. But like, you know, for the most part, yes, Peter Zeihan, that's right, that's where I'm getting it from. Yeah, for the most part, like if you really want to think about it properly. And like, this is a wonder of capitalism as well. Like you don't need to produce everything in your country anymore. And like, you know, you rely on the global economy. And this like, you know, a liberal ideal is like, you know, commerce equals like good trade and good commerce on a globalized scale would mean periods of peace, because like, you know, warring with your neighbor means you can't trade with them. And like, that's bad for business. So like, you know, there should be a level of peace that comes with prosperity, so they say. But like, we know that the capitalist machine, to be honest, works on a large scale on colonialism or imperialism in the Leninist sense. And so you have to kind of have some nations that are subjugated, so like, you know, the core of capitalism can kind of, you know, make all of its money and its profits, and like it does that by like keeping certain people undeveloped, and so they suppress them by making sure they stay undeveloped and they don't have political liberation and they don't advance themselves and stuff like that. So like the idea is that for you to be advanced in the modern world, like an advanced industrial nation, you need to be part of the global system. You need to rely on global trade. No one can do it alone. And that's why socialism is international as well. And why a lot of these types of experiments with Juche or you know, socialism with Chinese characteristics, all that sort of stuff, you know, the communism in one country, or socialism in one country, in the Stalinist sense, like all of that sort of stuff is meaningless in the true understanding of how a socialist kind of society would work, because like the working class knows no nation, knows no borders, all that sort of stuff. It's a recognition that the development of the productive forces of capital is so amazing that like it pulls the entire world together. The entire world comes together, and the working class of the entire world produces all the value that everyone in the world needs. And so socialism will have to be international. And so like, you know, when people start talking about like this scary, like, you know, world government kind of like, I don't know, thing, like these kind of conspiracy theories about like what that would look like, to be honest, the only way to overcome some of the issues that we are facing as a species, like talking about like ecological disaster and all that sort of stuff, like economic problems, the demographic shift across the world to negative population growth, I think the only way that we can solve a lot of these problems is through international government, like through a world government kind of situation. And like that's a precursor to socialism, if you ask me. If I remember correctly, thanks to NAFTA, they could pretty much double their population and they'd be fine, raw numbers wise. But the Americans, yes. Yeah, I think they have the resources and the stuff under their control anyway, within arm's reach, like within the North American and South American continents, to be able to deal with that comfortably. So anyway, I digress again.
Electronics are assembled in Taiwan, our cars come from Germany, gold comes from the Congo, and lithium batteries come from Bolivia. North Korea has none of those because of the embargo. People like to point at North Korea and say that socialism doesn't work, but this is very much not even close to reality. People point at North Korea and say civilians aren't even allowed to drive cars, which, yeah, sounds bad, but that's for two reasons. One is that North Korea has no way to produce cars, and more significantly, North Korea has no oil field and it's impossible for them to import oil. So North Koreans driving cars would be impossible because they wouldn't have anything to run their cars with.
How crazy was that in the pool in the documentary that we were watching before, when like that lady was reading from the newspaper about the efforts of the Korean army or like the combat force, and like they didn't have enough petrol to kind of fill in this swampy area to build like whatever they were working on. So like the soldiers got in there and like dug it all up by hand and filled it all in by hand. And so they put their army to use in construction projects. And because they don't have fuel, they didn't have access to fuel, like they were doing literal manual labor, like things that they could have used machinery for, but they don't have access to fossil fuels. And so like their armies work with using manual labor. Like that's how severely they are cut off from the global economy, which is a comment on global economics. And like it should be a realization for how globalized we are. And like, you know, threats to globalization are threats to all of us. Like, so when they start fear-mongering about World War III and like China v. America and stuff like that, we should all be very, very worried about what that means for us economically. Because like we are all screwed when the world deglobalizes. Because like, not that like globalization is this amazing thing, but like, you know, we're all addicted to it now. It's going to be hard to come off that high and that drug trip. North Korea has an electric car manufacturer now. There you go. Madusan EV. There you go. That's interesting. I wonder where they're sourcing all the parts from.
People instead go by subway, bike, or train. North Korea is heavily using trains run on coal. And that seems like an ancient technology to us, because our trains are run on diesel or more commonly electricity. But one of the few natural resources North Korea has is coal. So they use it for everything, for heating, for power generation, and to run trains. Really, the North Korean economy is what happens when a country is forcibly isolated from the global economy and somehow has to exist on its own. And of course, the North Korean economy can't produce everything the global economy produces, so they're falling behind in, well, everything. So in conclusion, I can say that North Korea is a very unique country. It's a democracy on paper and not really in praxis. It is in constant tension with both South Korea and the USA, and its economy is a USSR-style planned economy without any access to the global market, causing the country to fall behind the rest of the world. And my hot take is still that it's not a monarchy, no matter what American TV tells me. Also, here's a fun fact. The full title of Kim Jong-un is Supreme Leader and President of the State Affairs Commission, General Secretary of the Workers' Party of Korea, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces of North Korea, Chairman of the Central Military Commission of the Workers' Party of Korea, Member of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, Marshal of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un. Thanks to my patrons for enabling me to have an income without putting annoying ads on my videos.
That's interesting, because he did have an ad at the start. Sorry, that EV company is imported from China. Oh, okay. Very Targaryen-esque title. Yeah, okay, so it is Chinese, yeah. Well, they've got electricity if they have coal. So, like, maybe that's how they can get the EVs running, because if they don't have access to, like, fuel properly, then that would be a big fucking problem for them. Yeah, I think so, but they say they are North Korean. Well, like, that's an insight into how Korea works, okay? Like, North Korea works, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. So, like, I think that's good to have that in mind, because, like, it's definitely not as simple as the Western kind of narrative about it. Like, the Western narrative is definitely that it's like, I don't know, an evil dictatorship, and that's pretty much it. And, like, everybody is, like, kind of just like this group of, like, soulless, lifeless, miserables that live underneath this, like, very crazy dictatorship. But, like, there seems to be a lot of structure to their economy, to their society, to their way of life. It seems to be basically based on a very belligerent outlook of the world, that, like, they're literally at war, and they're a wartime economy, and they've kept themselves at that level. Now, you could argue that they've kept themselves in the psyche of a wartime economy to kind of keep that political institution in check and keep control of society in check like that. But, like, you know, they seem to be making it work in the face of being basically cut off from the global capitalist machine. So it'll be interesting to really understand the relationship between China and Korea now, because, like, you know, China is obviously economic power number 2 in the face of, like, a US-led world order. And so, like, the Chinese would have the ability to help Korea step into the 21st century. The real question is why they aren't doing that supremely. The point that he's made in this video is, like, the Chinese only really kind of entertain the North Koreans or assist the North Koreans is because they do want a buffer between America and South Korea and their own territory. And so they're happy to have the North Koreans there as that buffer. So Gulf of America, Gulf of Mexico. Brian Gibbs, thanks for that addition to the chat there. That's an interesting one. That's a whole conversation right there. and it's like part of like the changing of the geopolitical order and like kind of shoring up everything that's America. It's international waters. Yes, but by name, it is definitely belonging to the US of A. So yeah, look, I think it's good to kind of, yeah, like I said, have an understanding of how Korea works kind of on paper politically, and a little bit of an understanding of their society. And so like you can have a look now at the propaganda when you get it, right? When you see the next time that like, I don't know, the North Koreans are being talked about in the press because they're testing weapons or something like that. You can really just look at it and be like, well, is that all that they do? They just test weapons and they do everything that their supreme leader says? Or is there a whole life out there? Like there's a whole system out there that's looking after itself and it's just being ruled by a particular ruling class like every other country in this world. Where theirs is done directly or overtly, and like in many capitalist countries, it's done covertly and indirectly by some type of section of the bourgeoisie, if not the entirety of the bourgeoisie. So, like, you know, don't go judging too quickly is a good lesson to be learned from like this type of investigation. Don't go judging too quickly. So look, I have had a few new people in the chat, and so like I should have done this earlier, but like I'm just going to do some quick promo. So if you've enjoyed this conversation and you're interested in continuing this kind of conversation with like-minded people that like to, you know, throw their own propaganda around, and then you can watch it and you can give us your 2 cents. Here is the Discord. So go and join the Discord. You know, do yourself a favor, join the Discord. You will not be sorry. And like I said, you can throw your own propaganda on there and everyone will love you for it. And then alternatively to that, like please go and join, sign up to the Patreon as well, my Patreon. So at least I can get you notifications, because I can't do that on social media. YouTube's algorithm, all the other platforms, their algorithms don't work by actually giving notifications to people. They do it to a select bunch and then see how the content goes, kind of thing. So yeah, if you want to get notifications, go join the Patreon too. Idiocracy almost seems like the better alternative at this point. Is that the movie that you're referencing, or you just mean Idiocracy generally? Because like apparently there is a movie that is called that I've been suggested that I should watch it. So I got your notification on Patreon today. I made it. Oh, great. That's good. I'm glad it's working. Yeah, the movie. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I will have to actually, I downloaded it. I haven't watched it yet, so I'll have to check it out. But yes. Thank you for joining North Korea. All the way, we're busting myths, we're debunking things here on the channel. This is what we do here, ladies and gentlemen. So thanks for coming along for the ride. Or you should definitely watch it for the lols. All right, yeah, I'll check it out then, because it has been suggested to me. I just haven't got around to it yet. Apparently, I've got to watch Europa first, according to the Muffin Man. Which I am watching, and like I'm not gonna lie, it's difficult. So yeah, I will try and figure this out. We're gonna go to Twitch tomorrow to do our stream, and we're gonna watch the rest of that documentary, because I'm pretty sure we won't get censored there. So if you guys are interested, if people are interested in Twitch, I guess I should put the Twitch there too, just in case. If you want to watch the rest of that documentary on the chat, if you don't want to watch it by yourself, which, you know, go for it. If you want to watch it with us, then I will put my Twitch thing here, whatever it's called, Twitch handle. And yeah, come join us on Twitch tomorrow. And we'll watch the rest of that documentary, which I'm really interested in finishing off now, I must admit. So yeah, look, thank you everybody. Thanks for everyone who's joined in on the chat, who's been listening in the background. It's been quite lively. Jag, thank you. Reality Pixel Media, Ollie Atlas, Adam, good to have you back again, twice in a row. Cindy the Skull, Newbie, The Muffin Man, of course, poking the bear as always. Who have I missed? Anyone? No, I think I've got everyone. 4IS, of course, as always. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. David showed up today. It's been a while. Thank you everyone for joining, and we will do, like I said, Twitch tomorrow, and we'll continue the investigation into the real people of North Korea. So until tomorrow, please remember, as always, I am, you are, we are a MysterE. See you all tomorrow. Cheers.